Welcome everybody to this introduction to macroeconomics. We have already talked about the first part, and now I would like to talk about the transmission mechanism. So how does fiscal policy or monetary policy in the end affect the GDP level and the business cycle, and what kind of negative side effects can occur? Afterwards, I would like to introduce a short model which highlights the relationship between money supply and goods supply. We'll have a look at the theory, and we'll also have a look at the empirical evidence. I would like to use this graph to talk about the transmission mechanism. On the next slide, you also have a written part, like where I write down the different steps which can be seen on the previous slide. So in case that you are lost, then please have a look at slide number 14. So we start with the government, who increases government spending. This leads to an increase in goods demand. Goods demand is larger than goods supply. It is the case that the companies will adjust production. They will react to this increase in demand with an increase in supply. They will increase production, and therefore the income generated in the production process will increase. When income increases, then consumption will increase, and this will boost demand once more. When demand increases, this process will be reinforced, like the excess demand will increase even further, so that production will be adjusted and consumption will also increase in a second circle. So here you can see different circles, and this indicates that a multiplier process should kick in, so that in the end an increase of government spending, like of €1, will increase GDP by more than €1, let's say perhaps by €5. So it would be very nice when this multiplier process works, because then 1 unit in government spending would be very effective in affecting GDP. Until now, we only talked about the positive effects, but macroeconomists, they always believe that there are not only positive effects by one policy, but there are also some negative side effects. Macroeconomics think in this way, that there is always a negative side effect. Why is that? Because macroeconomics believe that in case that there is one policy which only has positive effects, then this kind of policy would have been implemented in the first place, so that this kind of policy option would be gone. So therefore, macroeconomists believe that there are only policy options left which have some pros and some cons, and then it is up to the policy maker to decide whether the pros are larger than the cons and whether this policy has to be implemented. When it comes to an increase in government spending, until now it only has positive effects. What could be a negative side effect? Let's put it that way. Like the savers, they have provided some capital, and this capital is supplied at the capital market, and it is the case that some companies will use this capital in order to finance investment. In case that the government increases government spending, the government budget will end up in red ink. The government will run a government budget deficit, and this has to be financed at the capital market. When the government arrives and finances its government budget deficit, it will be the case that there is less capital left in order to finance the investment for the companies, and therefore, in the end, private investment decreases. The government is crowding out private investment, and this is the negative side effect. Of course, right now you'll not understand each and every step here, but at the end of this lecture, like at the end of the semester, this transmission mechanism will make perfectly sense to you. Let's have a look at the second macroeconomic policy, where we talk about an expansionary fiscal policy in the form of a decrease of the tax rate. So the tax rate decreases, let's say it's an income tax, then the disposable income will increase. The consumer has more money in the pockets and goes shopping. Therefore, goods demand increases, goods demand is larger than goods supply. The companies will adjust production, production increases, and the income generated in the production process will increase. When the income increases, consumption increases. This will boost demand for goods once more, and also here a positive multiplier effect should work. What are the negative side effects? We have talked about them already. When the government decreases the taxes, it will lead to a government budget deficit. This has to be financed. The government arrives at the capital market, gets a loan from the capital market, and then there is less capital left for companies to invest. So private investment decreases, and this has a negative implication for the capital stock of the economy we are looking at. All these different steps are also mentioned on the next slide. Let's talk about the transmission mechanism of an expansionary monetary policy. Here you will see a lot of different terms which do not give meaning to you right now, but it will be the case that you will understand this kind of stuff at the end of this semester. Let's briefly talk about it. So the central bank will increase the so-called monetary base. This will increase money supply. What is very important is that the expansionary monetary policy should lead to a decrease of the interest rate. The interest rate decreases, and then it will be the case that the demand for investment goods and consumer durables increases, and this boosts goods demand. Goods demand increases, leads to an excess demand at the goods market. The companies start to produce. The income generated in the production process increases, consumption increases, and then goods demand is boosted once more. So also here a positive multiplier effect should take place. I really expect that you don't understand this slide completely, at least at this point in time. But as I mentioned, at the end of the semester, also this transmission mechanism makes perfectly sense. The main takeaway of this slide should be right now that an expansionary monetary policy leads to a decrease of the interest rate. This will increase investment and will boost goods demand. So I think that these three steps here are the three most important steps of this slide. On the next slide, you can also see the transmission mechanism described verbally. When we look at this transmission mechanism of an expansionary monetary policy, it is the case that there are no negative side effects. So until now, we did not mention any negative side effects, but this will change in the next part of the lecture. So one negative side effect of an expansionary monetary policy could be inflation. This is frequently mentioned that an expansionary monetary policy leads to inflation. And I would like to highlight under which conditions this is indeed the case. Let's have a look at our theoretical model, which is a very, very tiny, nice little theoretical model. This is a kind of scale, and on the left-hand part of the scale there is money supply, and on the right-hand side there is the supply of goods and services. In between, we measure the price level, and the price level is equal to 100. So here, this scale indicates that there is a relationship between money supply, goods supply, and the price level. Right now, the scale seems to be balanced, and therefore the price level is at the level of 100. The big question is, what happens if money supply increases by 100%? So what happens if money supply doubles? What happens to the price level? Nothing. Nothing in case that also the right-hand side of the scale increases by 100% and doubles. So in case that money supply increases by 100% and goods supply increases by 100%, then the scale is once more balanced and the price level will stay constant at the level of 100%. Maybe you came up with a different answer to this question. So let's phrase it a little bit different. What happens to the price level if money supply increases and goods supply is constant? Then of course the scale will not be balanced anymore and the price level will increase. The price level will increase. Therefore, in case that goods supply is constant, an increase in money supply will lead to inflation. In the next part of the lecture, I would like to talk about the relationship between money growth and inflation in the euro area. So I would like to talk about the empirics, about the empirical evidence of this relationship. In order to understand this graph, we first have to derive the so-called growth target for money supply of the ECB. So the ECB has a money growth target. How much should money supply increase in the euro area? In a first step, it is the case that we have to think about the inflation target of the ECB. So in case that the inflation target would be equal to 100%, so that goods prices should increase by 100% each year, then the ECB should double money supply each year. But this is not the case. The target of the ECB is that the inflation rate should take the value of 2%, so 2% is the inflation target. When the inflation rate should increase by 2%, it should also be the case that here money supply should increase by 2%. We should also think about what happens to the right part of the scale. It should be the case that we have to adjust money supply in case that the amount of goods and services is increasing over time. And we know that the euro area is in industrialized countries, and we know that in industrialized countries the GDP grows over time. So we need an estimate with respect to the growth rate. And the growth rate is estimated to be equal to like 2%. This is the expected growth trend, the growth potential for the euro area. Therefore, we also need 2% more money in order to finance this growth potential and the increase in goods and services. 2 plus 2, that's 4%. Money supply should increase by 4% in order to finance the increase in goods and services and reach an inflation rate of 2%. Then there is also one adjustment factor. I don't want to talk about the adjustment factor. The adjustment factor is pretty low, 0.5%. So the growth rate for money supply of the ECB should be equal to 4.5% for money supply. Money supply should increase by 4.5%, while the target with respect to the inflation rate is equal to 2%. On this slide, you can see the development of money supply growth and the inflation rate over time. We have one blue line here, that's 1999, where the ECB took the responsibility for the monetary policy. So before 99, it was the case that all the different central banks of the different euro area member countries, they were responsible for the monetary policy. So the Deutsche Bundesbank was responsible for the monetary policy for Germany, and the Bank of Italy was responsible for the monetary policy of Italy. But after 99, it is the case that the ECB took over this responsibility. What can we observe in this graph? First of all, it is the case that there is a positive correlation between the black line and the red line. In case that the red line goes up, also the black line goes up, and in case that the red line goes down, the black line goes down. So there is a positive correlation. And this is also in line with our theoretical model. So when money growth rate increases, when the left part of the scale increases, this could lead to inflation. And this is what is confirmed by this graph. It is also the case that the red line is running above the black line. So it's not the case that these two lines intersect. There is no intersection at all. But the red line is always running above the black line, and this could be explained by growing economies. Like we also derived the money growth target of the ECB, it was equal to 4.5%, while the inflation target was equal to 2%. The difference was due to the fact that the economies are growing over time, and it seems to be the case that also the economies which built the euro area, they were growing over time because there's no intersection of the different lines. Then the turning points. This is also very important. Like third characteristic, the turning points. The red line runs before the black line. So the red line reaches the maximum here, and the black line reaches the maximum here. There is a time difference of about 6 to 8 quarters. Then also the red line reaches its minimum here, and the black line reaches its minimum here. It seems to be the case that the red line is moving first, and then the black line is reacting to the red line. And this is also in line with our scale that the inflation rate is reacting to the growth rate of money supply. This is also in line with our theoretical model. Then what is also important to see is that the inflation rate after 99 is equal to 2%. So the ECB reaches the goal with respect to price stability. Inflation rate is indeed equal to 2%. But what about the second target, like the intermediate target? The growth rate of money supply should be equal to 4.5%. But the actual rate of monetary expansion is too high. So the red line is always above target of 4.5%. This could, of course, lead to inflationary pressures in the future. We don't know because of the fact that there is this time lag between the reaction of the red line and the black line. So it might be the case that subsequently the inflation rate will pick up in the euro area because of the fact that monetary expansion rate is too high. Now we are in the year 2020, so at one part of the lecture we can check what happened after 2006, what happened after 2006 to the inflation rate. Did the inflation rate increase? Yes or no? Let's summarize this chapter. We talked about what is the objective of macroeconomic policy? We talked about demand-sided macroeconomic policies, where the objective is to smooth business cycle volatility. And we also talked about supply-sided policies, where the objective of this kind of macroeconomic policy is to increase the growth trend of the economy. We talked about the transmission mechanisms. There were 3 different transmission mechanisms for an increase in government spending, a decrease in taxes, and also an expansionary monetary policy. I do not expect that you understand the transmission mechanisms right now, but at the end of the semester you will know what we are talking about. Then, what is also very important is that macroeconomists, they always believe that macroeconomic policy comes with some negative side effects. So macroeconomists, they believe that there might be some positive effects, but there are also negative side effects. We always say, like, there is no free lunch. It's not the case that we can implement a macroeconomic policy which is always positive. Let's talk about some negative side effects. We talked about inflation already. We talked about the interest rate induced crowding out effect, that the government action, especially the fiscal policies, will lead to lower private investment because the government is crowding out private companies, and investment will be lower. And then we also talked about a government budget deficit. So when the government is increasing government spending or is decreasing taxes, this could lead to a government budget deficit, and this is also regarded to be a kind of negative side effect here. Thank you very much that you attended this lecture. Have a nice day. Bye bye.